Have you ever felt the shift when a woman who was once deeply interested starts pulling away, her attention slipping like sand through your fingers, and you find yourself wondering where it all went wrong? This is one of the most confusing moments in any connection, because the harder you try to win her back with effort, the further she seems to drift. But attraction doesn't return by pleading, convincing, or proving yourself. It returns when you understand how feminine psychology works, when you master the art of space, energy, and polarity. And if you can do these three things, you don't just regain her interest, you reawaken the spark that makes her drawn to you again without resistance. When a woman begins to pull away or lose interest, most people instinctively start pouring more energy into her, trying to close the gap with words, gestures, and attention. But what they fail to see is that this approach often accelerates the distance rather than closing it, because feminine energy is not drawn to desperation or neediness. It is drawn to calm, grounded strength. And this strength can only be accessed when you shift your energy back to yourself, redirecting all the effort you are currently pouring outward into a process of rebuilding your own presence, confidence, and emotional stability, which not only changes the dynamic with her, but also changes the way you show up in every area of your life. Because when you stop making her reactions the center of your universe, you stop giving away your power and start reclaiming the parts of yourself that may have been lost in the pursuit of her attention. Shifting energy back to yourself is not an act of punishment or withdrawal, but rather a deep act of self-preservation. Because when you prioritize her emotions above your own and make her approval your source of validation, you unconsciously teach her that your worth is dependent on her. And over time, this creates an imbalance that erodes attraction, since a woman's feminine energy seeks to be met with strength, direction, and leadership, not someone who is constantly seeking reassurance from her. So when you decide to step back and invest that energy into your own growth, she begins to sense a shift in your vibration. She feels that you are no longer operating from a place of lack, but from a place of abundance. And this shift is magnetic, because true attraction is born from a sense of stability and self-assurance, not from chasing or pleading for interest. This shift requires you to reconnect with the version of yourself that existed before you placed her on a pedestal, the version of you that had dreams, passions, and a life outside of her attention. Because often when a woman loses interest, it is not because of who you are, but because you've allowed your identity to become consumed by her, and that energy feels heavy rather than inspiring. So the first step is to take an honest inventory of where your energy is going and begin redirecting it toward your physical health, mental clarity, spiritual grounding, and emotional healing. Because when you feel strong within yourself, you naturally exude a confidence that no words can replicate. And this confidence does not need to announce itself. It is felt in the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, and the way you engage with the world, which slowly begins to reframe how she sees you, because she now senses the depth of your self-respect. Shifting energy back to self also means learning to detach from outcomes, because attachment to her reaction only breeds anxiety, and that anxiety is felt even when it is not spoken, which can push her further away. But when you begin to pour into your own purpose, your own passions, and your own personal growth, you no longer need her attention to validate your worth. And this creates a freedom within the connection that allows her to feel safe, to be drawn to you again, because attraction cannot flourish under pressure. It thrives when it feels a sense of spaciousness, and that spaciousness can only be created when you stop clinging and start building, when you stop chasing and start leading, when you stop overgiving and start valuing yourself enough to understand that your worth is not determined by how much she notices you, but by the strength of the man you become, regardless of her perception. This process of shifting energy is not something you do for her, but something you do for yourself. Because when you stop centering her in your every move, you regain control over your emotions, your decisions, and your sense of self. And she will feel this shift without you needing to announce it, because energy speaks louder than words. And when your energy says you are grounded, whole, and fulfilled within yourself, she begins to feel that pull again. Not because you tried to convince her, but because your presence now radiates strength and certainty. Creating emotional distance is one of the most misunderstood yet powerful steps in regaining a woman's interest, because most people believe that when someone begins to pull away, the solution is to close that gap with more affection, more messages, and more reassurance. But what they don't realize is that this very response reinforces the loss of attraction by making them appear more desperate, more reactive, and more emotionally dependent. And nothing repels feminine energy faster than the weight of neediness, because desire cannot be negotiated or forced. It must be inspired. And emotional distance is the tool that creates the space for desire to naturally return, allowing her to feel your absence and reawaken her curiosity about you. Emotional distance is not about playing games or creating artificial scarcity, but about restoring balance to a dynamic that has become too one-sided. Because when you are always available, always reaching out, and always prioritizing her over yourself, you unconsciously remove the sense of mystery and excitement that fuels attraction. And while you may think that constant reassurance will bring her closer, it often has the opposite effect, as she begins to feel that the connection is smothering rather than inspiring. So by consciously stepping back and creating emotional space, you allow her to breathe, you allow her to reflect, and most importantly, you allow her to miss you, something she cannot do if your presence is always right there filling every gap. This distance begins with your energy, not just your actions, because even if you physically withdraw, but remain emotionally consumed by her every word, every action, and every reaction, she will still feel the weight of your focus, as feminine energy is deeply intuitive and can sense when someone is emotionally orbiting around them. So the goal is not to disappear or become cold, but to redirect your emotional investment back to yourself, your passions, and your life. Because when your energy is no longer tethered to her attention, she will feel a shift in the dynamic. She will sense that you are no longer seeking validation from her approval, and this creates intrigue and magnetism far more powerful than words or gestures. Emotional distance also reintroduces tension into the connection, the healthy kind of tension that fuels attraction, because relationships thrive on polarity, and polarity requires a dance of closeness and space, of pursuit and retreat, of energy flowing back and forth. And when this rhythm is broken by over-availability, attraction naturally fades. But when you step back and hold your frame, you restore that polarity, and she begins to feel a spark reigniting within her, a curiosity about where your attention has shifted. And this curiosity is what draws her back, not out of fear of losing you, but out of a renewed desire to connect with you. In creating this distance, you also reclaim your power, because emotional detachment is not a wall you build to shut her out, but a boundary you create to protect your energy. A reminder to yourself that your worth is not tied to her approval. And when she senses that your happiness does not depend on her responses, it allows her to feel safe in your presence again, because there is nothing more attractive than someone who is emotionally steady, someone who is grounded enough to give space without resentment. And this kind of emotional strength makes her respect and admire you on a deeper level, because it communicates that you are secure enough in yourself to step back and allow her to come forward when she is ready. When you create emotional distance, you are not pushing her away. You are allowing her to feel your absence in a way that reignites desire, because human nature does not value what feels overly accessible. It values what feels earned and appreciated. And this space allows her to reconnect with her own emotions, to reflect on the dynamic without pressure, and to choose to invest in the connection from a place of genuine attraction rather than obligation. Rebuilding mystery and intrigue is one of the most powerful ways to reignite a woman's interest, because when a connection becomes predictable and overly familiar, attraction begins to fade, not because love disappears, but because curiosity has been replaced with certainty. And human desire thrives on curiosity, on that sense of wondering what is beneath the surface, on the excitement of not having every part of someone revealed too quickly. And this is where so many people make the mistake of oversharing, over-explaining, and overexposing themselves in an attempt to create closeness, not realizing that true closeness is built when there is an element of depth that remains to be discovered. A sense that no matter how much she knows about you, there is always more to uncover. Mystery does not mean playing games or withholding affection. It means cultivating a presence that is layered, a personality that is multifaceted, and a life that is rich and fulfilling outside of her. Because when she senses that your identity does not revolve entirely around her attention, she begins to feel drawn to you in a different way, intrigued not just by what you say, but by the energy you carry, the depth you hold, and the calm assurance that you are complete within yourself. And this depth cannot be fabricated. It is built through self-awareness, growth, and a refusal to become overly transparent in a way that removes all intrigue. Because the truth is that mystery is not about manipulation. It is about authenticity. It is about being so grounded in who you are that you do not feel the need to constantly prove or explain yourself. To rebuild intrigue, you must create contrast between what she already knows about you and what she has yet to experience, because attraction thrives in that space between familiarity and unpredictability, where she feels safe with you yet remains curious about you. And this requires intentionality in the way you carry yourself, because when you live a life filled with passion, purpose, and individuality, that energy naturally draws people toward you, and she will feel compelled to explore more of who you are, not because you are withholding anything from her, but because you are expanding as a person, evolving in ways that make her realize there are layers to you she has not yet seen. This sense of intrigue is also built through your actions, because words alone cannot create mystery. It is the way you move through the world, the way you choose when to engage deeply and when to hold back, the way you are warm yet not overly eager, present yet not desperate, because women are highly sensitive to energy, and they can feel when a man has depth, when he is not seeking validation, but instead carries a quiet confidence that makes them want to lean in closer. And that kind of confidence is magnetic, because it communicates that you are not fully revealed at first glance, that you are a man of substance and vision, someone whose life is not centered on external approval. Rebuilding mystery also requires reclaiming your personal boundaries, because without boundaries, you become too accessible, too predictable, and too easy to read. And while accessibility is important for connection, overexposure destroys the spark. So you must learn to create subtle space even in closeness, to share your life with her without making every moment of your inner world available, because attraction thrives in tension, and tension is created when there is something left for her to uncover, when she feels the excitement of peeling back your layers rather than being handed everything at once. When you rebuild intrigue, you remind remind her of what first drew her to you, the sense of excitement, curiosity, and discovery that made the connection feel alive. Because mystery is not about withholding love, but about maintaining polarity, about understanding that desire requires contrast. And contrast is created when you show up with a life that is full, a mind that is deep, and a presence that cannot be fully grasped in a single interaction, which makes her feel inspired, intrigued, and compelled to re-engage with you from a place of genuine fascination rather than obligation. Re-establishing boundaries is one of the most powerful yet overlooked steps in regaining a woman's interest, because boundaries are not walls meant to keep people out. They are the structure that defines your sense of self, your standards, and the level of respect you demand in any relationship. And when those boundaries become blurred or broken, attraction begins to erode, not because love disappears, but because respect fades in the absence of healthy limits, because a woman's feminine energy is naturally drawn to a man who is grounded in his values, who knows his worth, and is unafraid to enforce his standards. Yet when you begin tolerating behavior that goes against your principles, when you sacrifice your boundaries in order to please her or avoid conflict, you unconsciously communicate that your approval and affection can be earned without effort, and that subtle loss of self-respect is often felt more deeply than words could ever express. To re-establish boundaries, you must first reconnect with your identity, because boundaries are not something you create from a place of control. They are something you reclaim when you decide to no longer abandon yourself for the sake of keeping someone else comfortable. And this shift begins internally with a willingness to examine where you've allowed yourself to become too available, too forgiving, or too accommodating at the expense of your own values. Because relationships thrive on mutual respect, and respect is built when both individuals feel that their needs and limits are acknowledged. So when you begin enforcing your standards again, you are not pushing her away. You are rebalancing the dynamic and creating the polarity that is essential for attraction to thrive. Healthy boundaries also create emotional safety, not just for you, but for her. Because when a man has no boundaries, he is unpredictable. He is easily swayed by emotions. And this lack of stability can make a woman feel unsettled rather than drawn to him. But when you are rooted in your principles, when you are calm yet firm in how you allow yourself to be treated, she begins to feel a sense of security in your presence, because your boundaries communicate that you value yourself and expect the same from those you allow close to you. And this strength is magnetic, because feminine energy is drawn to masculine stability, to the man who is not afraid to stand his ground with quiet confidence rather than with anger or aggression. Re-establishing boundaries also requires emotional detachment, because boundaries are not enforced through arguments, manipulation, or ultimatums. They are upheld by your actions and your consistency. And when she sees that you are no longer willing to tolerate disrespect, neglect, or unhealthy dynamics, she begins to adjust naturally, because people treat you according to what you allow. And if you've spent months or years bending yourself to fit her expectations, this shift may feel uncomfortable at first, but over time it rebuilds attraction, because it reintroduces a sense of respect that only grows when she sees that your love does not mean losing yourself, and that your commitment to her does not mean abandoning your own standards. This process also demands a deep level of self-awareness, because boundaries are not about creating unnecessary distance. They are about honoring your emotional energy, your time, and your dignity, which means being intentional about the type of conversations you engage in, the level of effort you invest, and the way you allow yourself to show up. Because a man who values himself is not afraid to walk away from situations that undermine his self-respect. And this quiet strength creates a gravitational pull, a silent form of power that makes a woman view him differently. Because when you establish boundaries from a place of love and not ego, she feels that she can trust you. She feels that you are grounded and that your emotions are not easily swayed by her actions. Re-establishing boundaries is a way of reclaiming your role as a leader in the dynamic, not through control or dominance, but through calm, consistent action that communicates that you are a man of depth and substance, that you will give love freely, but will never compromise your dignity. And this balance of love and strength is what keeps attraction alive, because respect is the foundation of desire, and desire cannot exist when one person feels like they can do anything without consequence. So when you step back, regain your sense of self, and calmly reintroduce those boundaries, you shift the energy of the relationship and remind her of the strength that first drew her in. Leading with purpose instead of neediness is one of the most attractive qualities a man can embody, because it communicates depth, strength, and self-assurance in a way that words alone never could. And this is where many lose their sense of power in relationships, as they confuse leadership with control or dominance and mistake attention for validation. But true leadership is rooted in a clear sense of purpose, a vision for your life that guides your actions, and a deep understanding of your worth that does not depend on the presence or approval of any woman. Because when a man operates from neediness, his energy feels heavy, desperate, and unbalanced. And that energy is felt long before it is ever spoken. Whereas a man who leads with purpose carries a calm, magnetic presence that draws her in naturally, because she feels safe and inspired in his frame. Neediness is not always obvious. It can hide behind constant texting, overgiving, or seeking reassurance. And it often comes from a fear of losing her or a fear of not being enough. But women can sense this fear at an energetic level, and it creates a subtle pressure in the connection that pushes them away. Because feminine energy cannot relax into a man who is unsure of himself or his direction. It seeks the steadiness of someone who knows where he is going and who does not crumble when his validation is not immediately reciprocated. And that steadiness is born from having a purpose bigger than her, a reason for your existence that transcends any single relationship. Because when you are grounded in that sense of direction, you no longer try to prove your worth through her interest. You embody your worth through your actions, and that is what makes her see you as a man of value. Purpose is not just about career or financial goals. It is about having a vision for your life, your health, your emotional growth, your contribution to the world, and your legacy. Because when a man is connected to something greater than himself, he becomes magnetic. Not because he tries to be, but because his energy naturally carries weight, and women are drawn to that weight, to that sense of stability and ambition that signals strength and leadership. And this leadership is not about controlling her, but about guiding the relationship with clarity, making decisions with confidence, and standing firm in your values without apology. Because a woman feels safe when she knows that the man she is drawn to is capable of navigating life's challenges with calmness and certainty. To lead with purpose, you must first release the need to impress or win her approval, because attraction does not grow from convincing her of your value. It grows when she feels your value through the way you move, the way you prioritize, and the way you handle yourself in all areas of life. And this shift is only possible when you stop seeing her as the center of your existence and instead see her as part of a larger vision, Because when you live with purpose, you stop trying to pull her into your world with pressure or effort. You simply create a life so fulfilling, so meaningful, that she wants to be part of it without hesitation. A man who leads with purpose does not beg for attention. He commands respect without needing to demand it, because his energy speaks louder than his words. And this energy is built in solitude, through discipline, through pursuing his goals even when no one is watching, because it is in those moments that you shape yourself into a man who inspires rather than pleads, who leads rather than chases, and who creates attraction not by asking for it, but by embodying a sense